Good Thursday morning. It's the Daily Digest. This is the second Sunday after Easter. It's this week we're in, and we have the children of Israel again out in the wilderness, uh, into the wilderness of Sinai. They were departed from Rephidim. Now remember, they beat the Amalekites. Their desert of Sinai, pitched in the wilderness. They come to the Mount Sinai. And so we see that now we see this kind of visitation, right? God's going to have a visitation with his people, and Moses is the mediator for that. God calls him up in the mountain. Um, and God says, you saw what I did to the Egyptian, how I bear you on eagle's wings. There's that bearing up on eagle's wings imagery we've seen with Isaiah before. And that's kind of the picture of being borne out into safety. And brought you unto myself. I wonder if Tolkien was playing with that with his eagles. Anyway, now therefore, if you will obey my voice indeed and keep my covenant, then you will be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people. For all the earth is mine, right? He could have had his choice of all the earth. He's sovereign over all of it, but he's declared this people, and his covenant. They must stay in covenant with him. And you shall be unto me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. This is interesting. Israel is a nation of priests. It's a holy nation. The church is Israel, and therefore the church is all priests. There's a priesthood of all believers. What's confusing, of course, is what we're talking about in terms of an Old Testament priest is not the same as a presbyter. The role, vocation, graces of a presbyter are not the same. It's just that was the presbyter is where we get the idea of priest, word priest from. Priest is just a contraction of presbyter, but in English, the religious figure, the religious person leading services, including service at an altar, is a presbyter or a bishop. And so it was the closest and analogous office to translate what this is, even though we're all in this being a priest, and Jesus is of course a high priest, and we're within that order. We're going to hear that in a second. Also, even though there was the whole nation is a priesthood, there is a Levitical priesthood still. What does a priest do, though, that all people are called to do that are God's people? Lift up praises to God, offering sacrifice to God, worshiping God, teaching the law of God, speaking the law of God, obeying the law of God, in a sense being the religious, carrying on the faith, right? The rest of the world isn't in rebellion against God and idolatry, so we do it. And in that, we're the temple. We're carrying on even as the rest of the world has walked away from God. So God's people are the priesthood in that sense, and he wants a holy nation. Of course, Israel's going to fail to do this over and over again throughout our history, but this is what they're intended for, and this is what Christ is going to make possible. Again, speaking, Moses calls the elders, laid before their faces all these words which the Lord commanded them. On the third day in the morning, there were thunders and lightnings and a thick cloud upon the mount, the voice of the trumpet exceeding loud. Okay, those are all things that happen when God shows up, and God's shown up on Mount Sinai. Moses summons the people basically out of the camp to meet with God. It's a terrifying prospect, right? Come out to meet God, meet your maker, meet your redeemer who saved you from Egypt. He's terrifying. And they stood in another part of the mount, the lower part, right? Smoke, fire, smoke, furnace, quake, mountain, earthquake. Okay, those are again all things that happen when God shows up. Big things, right? And the Bible uses the same imagery over and over again for God's special covenant presence, his covenant glory. And when the voice of the trumpet sounded, long and waxed louder and louder. Moses spake, and God answered him by a voice. Right. So God's talking to Moses. I mean, Moses just it's not just having a conversation with God, but he is able to mediate, right, between God and man. And then God called Moses up into the mountain, and we'll continue on from there. Now, sorry, I'm touching my mouth and my face. Got something stuck in my teeth. I've got stuff in my mouth. I should not have eaten snacks. Oh well. We are good to go. Wash my hands. I'll wash them again. All right. Hebrews 7:12 to the end. All right. Hebrews is interesting. We have priesthood again. The priest is being changed. The law is different too, somewhat. Because now we're not dealing again with the priesthood of Levi. We're dealing with the priesthood of Melchizedek because Jesus is from the tribe of Judah. He is not in the Levitical order of priests. He's in the Melchizedekian order of priests. And who is made not after the law of a carnal commandment, but the power of an endless life. So this eternal sort of thing, this everlasting thing. And we hear a quotation from the Psalms, "Thou art a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek." And then we find later, right, if we look at the quote again, it's a swearing, that an oath in a sense, that yes, he will be of the priest of the order of Melchizedek. Because the foreshadowing law has been surpassed by the reality that it was pointing towards. Kind of like John the Baptist, he must become greater, I must become less. Sort of like that, but even more, right? The Old Testament, its laws, its ceremonies, its rites, many of them were looking forward to when Jesus came, so we understood what Jesus is doing, what he's about. And then Jesus does them and delivers them and the benefits of those accomplishments to us. And so we don't, that in a sense, the old has been surpassed in a very beautiful, wonderful way, right? The foreshadowings, and you don't need to keep going back to the foreshadowings now that you have the real thing. Christ has an unchangeable priesthood. He's able to save, right? Other priests really weren't able to save. They're pointing to that which would be able to save the people, which they looked forward to, right? The Old Testament saints. Old Testament saints were saved by Christ, looking forward to him, even though they didn't know all the details about him. Jesus is also what's interesting too, right? The Lord's swear will not return, thou art a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. So this order of Melchizedek is an eternal one, an everlasting order that Jesus is in. The Levitical priesthood is not that. It's not given that promise of abiding forever by the Lord's own swearing by himself. Unlike the old Levitical high priest, right? The old high priest had to give offerings for his own sins as well as those of the people. Well, Christ is sinless. And of course, we're going to find out the blood of livestock isn't really a substitute for the blood of human beings, the image bearers of God. It's much more, those are all just looking forward to a sacrifice that is sufficient, of high enough quality to be to be sufficient to deal with humanity and humanity's sin and making humanity right with God. And Jesus doesn't have to keep offering up himself. It's just like the Old Testament priest used to keep every year, on certain occasions, keep offering up livestock. Jesus doesn't do that. It's himself once offered, right? One time. He hasn't the infirmities of sin, but instead is consecrated forevermore, right? He's set apart, made holy, and he won't sin. He will continue not to sin. So it's a good thing, and that's something we can hope in, right? Jesus is still our high priest forever and ever. So I'll catch you all later.